Hey, Dane Matta here with Physical Therapy Biz, and we're going to talk about 3 trends that I'm seeing in 2025 that you need to be aware of if you're either thinking about starting or growing your cash-based physical therapy clinic. So for the last 10 to 11 years, I've been involved in the world of cash-based physical therapy clinics. And for me, it started with starting my own clinic and eventually now helping clinicians all across the country start, grow, and scale their own clinics. And one of the things that we get to see because of the amount of clinics that we work with is high-level trends. I had a professor whenever I was in my doctoral program that was an Air Force professor. And he would always say that you need to zoom out and look at something from a 30,000-foot view, which is a very Air Force thing to say. I was in the Army. We were always on the ground. But it makes sense when you think about what that means from a high-level perspective. And as a business owner, as a clinic owner in particular, what's hard is you're in it day in and day out. You're in the clinic, you're solving problems, you're trying to grow, you're trying to hire, you're leading people. So being able to take a step back and see what's happening across the entire industry may be something that you have no ability to do, or you have no resources to be able to have enough conversations with people to see what's happening in different states and demographics and niches and all kinds of stuff. So what I like to do, especially with this forum, is to be able to share what I'm seeing in real time so you can be aware of this as a clinic owner and start to front run these problems, start to solve them before they become a problem for your clinic. So there's 3 primary trends that I want to talk about that I see happening right now that you need to be aware of because they will materially affect your ability to either start, grow, or scale your clinic. Okay, and the first one is that clinicians are starting practices younger and younger right now. Now, this is something that if you are a young clinician, maybe this is a really positive thing, right? So you're saying, okay, I can leave school and I can start a clinic sooner. You can. And I don't know if people couldn't do it before, but maybe they just didn't because they didn't feel as clinically competent. I see clinicians coming straight out of school and going right into starting their own clinics now, more so than I saw even 5 years ago. I think there's a few reasons for this. Number one, I think that people see this model is working and they aren't as fearful of whether it will work for them or not. It's the whole idea of Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile, and then multiple people broke it within the next 12 months after that. People used to think it was impossible to run a 4-minute mile. And then all of a sudden, Roger Bannister does it, and now multiple other people do it in the same year. It is a broken barrier effect that we see. So young clinicians are seeing, oh, this student came out of school or this person was out of school for a year before they started their own thing. That gives them courage and it gives them a path that they see that's proven that then they can try and do the same thing themselves, which is how it works, right? So we're seeing more and more of that. If you're a younger clinician, this is a path that a lot of people will take. Normally, for most people, and if I'm being honest, if I have to give you advice, if you're in this like very early stage, you're just graduating, you're thinking about starting a practice, if you're still in school, maybe you've been out of the profession for a year, I find most clinicians they do the best with starting their own clinic when they have at least a couple of years of experience getting reps in the profession, seeing a lot of patients so that they feel very clinically competent when they go into their own clinic to start a practice and not have to worry about trying to become a good clinician at the same time that they have to learn how to try to run a business. That can be a very hard thing to do. And people are doing it, but it is potentially you're going to end up in the same place maybe after a few years, even if you wait a little bit, because the learning curve, you're not having to try to learn both things at the same time. The second thing, and this is affecting people that are more so in the stage of they've already started. So these are people that are between $10,000 and $20,000 in revenue, of gross revenue in their clinic. This means that they're working by themselves, most likely. Maybe they have an administrative assistant or something like that, a virtual assistant. But these are like smaller stage clinics, kind of more in a startup stage, solopreneur stage. And as you go to make the decision to move to what we consider a true business or an actual business that's bigger than yourself, you have to decide that you want to go through a growth cycle. Now, a growth cycle is where you are going to reinvest in the business, your profit is going to go down, and your gross revenue is going to go up. Now, this is a challenging thing to experience. I've gone through multiple of these, and what you see is maybe you go from $15,000, $20,000 a month in revenue to now you jump to 30 because you bring somebody else on to help fulfill, to see more volume, all of that. But because your overhead has gone up so much, you might be making significantly less than you were making when it was just you. And you had almost no overhead, you had no other people to pay for, you had no fixed facility costs really, you can keep your costs very low. And this is where people can feel like they made a bad decision. And this is nothing new. This is any service business that requires, people fulfilling a service and then being paid for that in any industry that does that, by the way. This could literally be HVAC mechanics, it could be, painters, it could be anything like that. And these growth cycles are important to understand and to understand what you're going into, because if you don't know what you're getting yourself into, it's way worse, way, way, way worse. And where I see most businesses actually fail with these type of practices is at this stage. So the reason that happens is normally they're unable to push through to be able to get past enough volume necessary to then be able to bring on a second, third, fourth clinician. They have the first one, they flounder for years trying to figure out how to actually grow past this stage, and they're stuck in this horrific place to be, which is terrible profit margins, significant work volume and stress on yourself because you're still seeing patients and you're now running a team, you're mentoring somebody, you're leading people, you're trying to build a bigger business and learn how to do all of that. But at the same time, you're making far less money. So where I see the challenge for these individuals is that they either shrink or they decide this isn't for me and they shut it down. And the failure rate at this stage is higher than basically anywhere else because the start stage is more mental. Are you willing to eat shit for a year to grow your clinic? It's not really a huge financial risk. It's more of a big time risk, and it's a mindset risk. On the flip side of that, this first growth stage, you have to build skills, you are reinvesting in your business, and there is a financial risk to this because you're taking on potentially a lease of a space for 5 years, equipment debt, you're bootstrapping this, or maybe you're taking funding out, which is a smarter route to go, by the way, if you're going to do that. And you're trying to build a schedule for somebody else as well as yourself and really grow past that first person. And it's a lot of work. It's more work than you just starting your clinic by yourself. So you get paid less, you do more work. And if you get stuck at this stage where you're in the lower side of this growth cycle, you never grow through it, then it's obvious that it's maybe a smart move to regress, drop down to where it's just you again, or maybe get so burnt out by this that you just leave the profession. And that's what we see in this stage. Primarily the second part of that. People get so burnt out and so frustrated from this that they just shut their clinic down and they move on to something else. They take a job doing something completely different. And I've got bad news for you. This stage has actually gotten harder over the last, I would say, 12 months in particular. And here's why. It's no secret that things have become more expensive. Inflation is this buzzword that nobody actually gave a shit about until about 5 years ago, when you started to hear people say inflation, right? It's like whatever, all over the news. Inflation is basically just the incremental increase in what things cost every single year. Historically, we've been at around 2 to 3% per the government data, right? When I was in the military, I would get a inflation adjusted pay raise every year that was usually about 2 to 3%. Now, that's a moderate change that we typically see on an annual basis. It's been significantly higher than that for the last 5 years, and it has to do with many factors that I'm not actually going to talk about on this podcast because it would take far too long to actually understand what's causing that. And you probably don't give a shit. What you care about is, yeah, you're right, my rent's more expensive. Car payment's more expensive. Insurance is more expensive. Food is more expensive. Across the board, many, many things cost more, especially than they did 5 years ago. But in particular for these clinics, what's happening is rent is more expensive. The cost of energy, the cost of utilities has gone up, and more importantly, the cost of being able to hire people has gone up, because the net effect is everyone's life is more expensive. Your staff members have to go buy groceries. They have to pay their student loans. They have to pay their rent or their mortgage. They have to pay for their kids' daycare. And because of that, their life is more expensive. And it demands that they are able to make more money in your clinic. So that means that your overhead now goes up across the board. So the growth cycle has gotten harder. It's gotten harder because everything is more expensive. And you have to be a really damn good business owner to be able to effectively charge what you are worth in order to have a big enough profit margin and gap there to where you can pay your people what they deserve and still be able to have a profitable business. Otherwise, you should shut it down, because you're not running a nonprofit. You could go get a job doing something else, making just as much, if not more money potentially at this stage, and have far less risk. So when we look at this stage, the margins are compressing across the board. Now, I'll tell you, if you're looking at this from two different angles, one, somebody that's just starting. If you're just starting, people are starting earlier, there's more clinics. That is going to become much more saturated. You're going to see a lot more very small solo practices. On the flip side of that, there's going to be fewer big practices, because here's what's going to happen. The people that are over here, this bigger group of solo clinicians, a good number of them are going to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to run through this wall and I'm going to try to go through this growth cycle. And a lot of them are going to get their ass whooped when they do so, and they're going to quit and they're going to shut their clinic down, or they're going to spring back to going back to a single clinician, and they're going to just regress and retreat and go back to that stage where it's just them, and they don't have as much risk, and they can make more money than they can in their growth cycle stage. But that means fewer people are actually going to push through to be bigger businesses, what we consider true businesses, where they then have at least a couple clinicians. So if you can get through to the other side, you have far more clear sailing because of that. And here is why. You are the bully at that point. You can dominate a market. You have a bigger brand. You can get better people. You can spend more on advertising. You can dominate a market at scale. But to get there, it's harder. So that means fewer people are going to get to the other side, but the ones that do are going to have a unique advantage for a very long period of time, because these clinics are not going anywhere. They're becoming more and more profitable at higher stages. They're becoming more acceptable within the profession. More people are starting these types of clinics than a full-on insurance-based clinic. Like, think about this for a second. Would you want to start a fully 100% insurance-based clinic right now? Like, it would be very hard to do, super hard. You have to at least go hybrid. You have to have some cash element and some insurance element in order to make that work, because at scale, you're seeing insurance reimbursements go down. And now some states are better than others, and maybe, there's some exceptions to that, but across the board, this is what we're seeing. A straight up insurance-based clinic is not as popular, especially with younger clinicians right now, them wanting to actually go that entrepreneurial route versus a cash and or a hybrid clinic. So if you can get through this more challenging growth cycle, it could be one of the best things that happens to you in business, because on the other side of that is a much, much easier path to continue to scale to multiple seven-figure clinic. Whereas previously, this was harder and we had more people to compete with that were bigger. Now, we're seeing less of that because fewer people are making it through this growth cycle. So there's two different ways to look at it. And it depends on where you're at. But for me, this is what I'm seeing. This stage has gotten harder. It's harder to figure out. It's harder to do correctly. But the people that do, they put themselves in a place to really be able to scale after that. The third thing, comp plans they have to change. They're changing right now. Historically, in a cash-based clinic, there's usually a compensation structure that is a lower guaranteed or base salary and more performance tied to that. So there's a performance bonus associated with revenue generated to the clinic and or visit volume, something like that. But there's some sort of performance metric that makes up a big chunk of that person's total take home. In some cases, it could be 50%. Maybe 30% is where it's trended towards. And now what we're seeing is those type of compensation offers are getting turned down left and right. And here's what brings us back to the second point, which is life is more expensive for everybody. People don't want to necessarily take on a lot of risk that want to work in a clinic for you. It's like an NFL contract. They want more guaranteed money. They will take a smaller total compensation structure for more guaranteed money. And that means for you, it's more guaranteed salary. So guaranteed salaries are having to go up, or your base compensation is having to go up. And you're going to have less associated with performance, which means that as the business owner, you're taking on more risk. So you're taking on more risk, and you have to be very competent and confident that you can build your clinic volume as well as run a business that retains people and builds recurring revenue, stickiness in your clients. That way you don't need quite as many new patients every single month in order to be able to build someone's schedule, and it snowballs from there. These are very important things that you have to be aware of and confident that you can do, because if you just hire somebody and you assume if you build it, they will come. If I hire somebody, I will have more patients. That doesn't work. That is not a strategy. That's a terrible idea. That's a great way to put yourself in a terrible position. If you know, for everybody that comes in, 40% of those people stick around and they do this with me ongoing, or I have this additional service or whatever. This is the lifetime value. Or if I invest this much money into advertising, I get this number of patients, and then I can put that into my lifetime value equation. Or if I do this number of in-person workshops or injury screens or community events or run groups or whatever locally, that means if I do this number, then it equals this number of patients, and those number of patients equals this many people stick around, and I can build a schedule that way. If you don't know your numbers in a very granular way about how much it's actually going to take for you to build someone's schedule, you shouldn't hire somebody. It's a bad idea. You're literally putting yourself in a bad financial position by bringing somebody else on and just hoping that their schedule is going to grow. That you need to be systematic about how you're growing their schedule and have a business model that really, really creates a snowball effect. And it's not just, the insurance-based model is you're churn and burning people. You're bringing them in, discharge. Bring them in, discharge. They can't even really do recurring stuff. So that's the model that a lot of people come out of. And you may have to retrain somebody into a different system or build an internal education system that helps people realize, yeah, we can do ongoing work with people. This is what it looks like. This is our business model. This is our sales process for this. This is how we run our play that works for us and allows us to have a lower volume clinic, and for you to really enjoy a better work-life balance because of that, right? And if you can have them make just as much money as they do in an insurance clinic, you're not gonna have any problems hiring whatsoever. But their compensation structure is changing. They want more guaranteed money, and they should. It's not their business. Why should they take on so much risk? Why should it be up to them to take on all the risk? And I've been on the other side of this. We've had some very sketchy compensation models early on with the people that we hired. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, and also we were scared. We were scared when we hired somebody, and we essentially passed on some of the risk to them, which is not necessarily the right way to go about it. And you're not going to get people saying yes to that very much anymore. They want more stability. They want more guaranteed pay. They want a higher base salary. And that means that maybe your bonus structure is obviously going to be lower than that. Total compensation is slightly higher from where we've seen even over the last couple of years, but it's really about that guaranteed salary that they really want. And they will not take contract agreements. They will not take job positions that don't have that in there. I've seen enough of these get turned down in the last few months that it's not a trend. I mean, it is here. It's happening right now. So you're going to have to really change your compensation structure to align with what people want and really be able to build that person up and build your clinic up without depending on them necessarily just driving a bunch of business to themselves and you getting frustrated because they're not doing enough workshops. Like, come on, you're the business owner. You're the one that's going to have to orchestrate a lot of these things to help build their schedule. They need to run your play. They need to be a great clinician, and they need to participate in the business and whatever that looks like. But the risk should not be on them as much as we have historically put it on our staff members. So these are the big three things that I see right now. Now, let me take a step back and just from an overarching trend standpoint, I've never, ever seen a better setup for cash-based clinics in the last decade that I've been involved in this. And it's changed a little bit. In 2014, when I started my clinic, it was very challenging for people to understand why they would want to pay me out of pocket to work with me. In fact, they kind of thought I was an asshole for not taking insurance. Now people realize, well, insurance is the asshole, They have huge deductibles. They have high premiums. They've got so much skin in the game as far as what they have to pay just to use their insurance, and they're informed consumers. And there's cash-based clinics of all sorts all around. There's even cash-based surgical clinics. Like imaging, functional medicine, lifestyle medicine, physical therapy, chiropractic, massage, like across the board. There's so many different variations of this now that people are more accepting, and they almost view that type of a clinic as having a higher level of quality service, which was hard to say if people looked at that 10, 11 years ago, whenever we started our clinic. So it's far more acceptable, but with more competition. But when we look at the path forward, this is such a fantastic time to really start and grow these businesses. The only caveat is it's gotten harder. It's gotten harder because the business landscape is more mature to the fact that we're seeing cash-based clinics being acquired by private equity. There's no fucking chance I would have ever thought that would have happened 11 years ago. Never. In fact, I thought I'd never even be able to grow my clinic past myself. That was my mentality going into it. And that was the reality at that point in time. And it's changed significantly over the last 10, 11 years. So the landscape is better for businesses, but you have more competition. You have more competition now, which makes it mean that you have to be a better business owner. I could be a terrible business owner 11 years ago, and I figured it out because they didn't really have anywhere else to go. Nobody was hiring staff clinicians in a cash-based clinic. So I got a lot of leeway because of that. I got to learn a lot of things the hard way without it really putting my business in a bad spot. So for you cannot, if you want to be a small lifestyle business, just you only, you can be a pretty bad business owner and make that work. If you want to grow past yourself, you want to get through this treacherous first growth cycle, and you want to actually be able to scale your business to multiple clinicians and put yourself in a much safer position, you have to be a business owner first and a clinician second. You have to lean into understanding how to run a business. You have to become very, very, very methodical about that. And primarily that needs to be the skill set that you're learning, because just being a great clinician is not going to be enough for you to understand how to navigate the treacherous waters of what we're seeing right now. And I don't think that growth cycle challenge for people to get through that first stage, I don't think it's getting any better anytime soon. That's the truth. I don't think it's getting better anytime soon. But again, if you can make it through that and you get to the other side where now you have even 2, 3 providers, the margins change dramatically. You could go from 5 to 8% net profit in a really shitty growth cycle as you're bringing just one person on up to 25, 30, 35%. And at scale, continue to scale that up. We're seeing clinicians that have cash-based practices that have personal incomes that are going over $500,000 a year. Like, think about that for a second. That is surgical, professional level money. That's insane. That's not something that I don't think any of us as PTs thought we would see, especially not in a cash-based clinic. So there's a path there that will be there for the people that can make it work, with the people that are willing to commit to becoming great business owners. That's a difference that I'm seeing. But these are the 3 big trends that I think you need to be aware of. On the front end, there's going to be more competition. There's just more people starting, but it's also kind of easier to start than ever before. So there's a big pro there for people that want to go that direction. I think the landscape is easier than ever to be able to start a clinic like this. It's more accepted. You're not having to educate people on everything. Like, it's a better overall landscape than when I started 10 plus years ago. The growth cycles are harder. So getting past that first growth cycle is harder than it was a decade ago. And the compensation structures are having to change, where you as a business owner are going to have to take on more risk. And that's just the way it is. So more risk, harder to get through that stage, but the upside is going to be better for you if you make it through. If you're just starting, I think the landscape is ideal. It is ripe to be able to replace your income versus working somewhere else. If you just want to stay small, right? If you just want to be, replace your income and go see like a small group of people and focus on a niche and just do that, just keep in mind, if you decide to do that and you don't want to become a business owner, I would not try to scale. I wouldn't do it. I think you're going to regret it, and it might put you out of business. You have to really be committed to becoming a great business owner and looking at your business as an investment that you're investing in, not as something that is just this risky thing that you're throwing money at. It needs to be an intentional investment, period. You have to look at it that way. I hope that these trends help you. These aren't things that, I worked with one clinic and now I'm bringing this shit up to you. And You have to be very careful about where you're getting information about this stuff as well. And I would just caveat to say this, even within our own industry, I love that there's more people out there helping cash-based, PTs and clinicians that want to go this path. But be very careful about how you're taking that information, where they're getting that information, if that information is accurate, and the scope in which they're seeing things. This is across the board something that you need to be aware of. The information you take in should be curated, and it should be based on experience and facts and truth, and not necessarily based on somebody that's a really good marketer. And I'm seeing a lot of that out there as well. And you probably are too. All over your social media feeds, you're probably seeing who knows how many people talking about how to get more new patients and this new system and this one thing. Look, the truth is business is fucking hard. It's really, really difficult. There's not one little system that's going to change your business. And if anybody is just like selling you something like that's not going to require a bunch of work, and you plug this system and all of a sudden you have a 7-figure business, that is not accurate. It's not true. And I hate to burst your bubble, but it's better than you wasted money on some shit that's literally going to waste your time and money. Like, you have to realize this is not one thing that's going to fix something. It is a lot of little incremental changes you make over committing to something for a long, long period of time, much like any change we make with our body. There's a reason why we can't improve our flexibility like that. What if we could? We would be incredibly unstable human beings. Like if I could truly change the range of motion in my hip extension by 10 degrees like that, I would have no control of that. I would have so many other problems associated with that, with joints above and below. We're built with resiliency and being robust on purpose. And for us to make true long-term changes, it takes habitual changes over a long period of time, and making small incremental changes that are frankly probably difficult for a lot of people to stick to. Business is no different. If you want to go this route, you have to commit to making true long-term changes, understanding what to do, looking at things, looking at the right data, becoming a better leader, getting the right people in the door, providing them an amazing place to work, continue to make that better, continue to do the same thing over and over again, and it can get monotonous. And that is the challenge of this in a lot of ways, but that's the only way that it works. That's it. So if you're not willing to commit to that, then just freaking stay small. Stay small and just do that. But also be careful of who you are taking information and advice from, where you're investing your money if you're going to get help on anything, and what you're listening to. And I try to provide what I consider incredibly curated information based on how the industry is going from an honest perspective of somebody who has been in clinics, is still working in clinics on a daily basis, and has worked with, to this date, 1,000 clinicians across the country. This is not, something I just started doing. This is something that I've been doing for a very long time, and I just want to share with you what's actually happening, what's working, and lessons learned from what we're seeing, because I think it will truly help you if you're willing to put the work in. So that's something I want to leave you with. That's another trend. I'll add that number 4. Lots of people out there, they're going to tell you that they're experts, and they don't know shit about what they're talking about. And I would hate for you to waste your money, your time, your effort on things that you think are going to be quick fixes because you've been marketed to by people that are much better at that than actually running these clinics. So as always, thank you so much for listening, watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.